Hello, students. This week 8, we're going to be focusing on Chapter 8, which is psychotherapeutic approaches and the person in need. To begin each chapter, we have our questions to consider as we're going through the reading, which are: what are the basic assumptions of the psychotherapeutic approaches to human problems? What are the common components of the different types of psychotherapy? What are the basic concepts of psychoanalysis? What are the characteristics of client-centered therapy? What are the advantages of group psychotherapy? What is family therapy? And does psychotherapy work? And so we're going to talk about two of the major schools of theories in counseling, which is psychoanalysis and client-centered. We're going to talk about a couple different types of modalities of counseling, group, family, talking about what kind of impact it usually has. So the chapter, as always, starts off with a little case study for you to think about. And it gets into the idea that, obviously novice behavioral or human service workers wouldn't be expected to have an intimate knowledge of different counseling theories and work from those perspectives. Obviously, that involves, an additional route for schooling and a very specific career journey that not all human service workers want to make. But having a basic understanding is really helpful because you can use these skills in any human service position, but also it's helpful to understand what the people you're working with might be dealing with or going through if they are in counseling or if you refer them to counseling services. And so psychotherapeutic approaches assume that a large portion of people's problems result from internal psychology. And so obviously as human service workers, we're not focused solely on internal workings, but also, everything in the person's environment and stuff like that. And so this is just one sort of aspect of it. And so 6 assumptions constitute the basic framework. Psychological distress or behavioral disturbance is a function of the problem in the subject's personality structure. The function of internal psychological processes is more important in determining behavior than the person's environment. Past experiences are more important than current experiences in determining behavior or personality. Behavior is over-determined. The basic personality structure is so powerful that individuals' acts of will that focus on changing ingrained patterns are ineffective. There is an optimum personality structure, so we should all be kind of working to achieve this optimum structure for our personality. And if an individual has not yet reached that optimum level of personality structure, is experiencing difficulties, he or she can often be helped to grow through a process of relating to a trained helper who understands human development. And so this is called psychotherapy, which a lot of times has multiple names. We can call it counseling, therapy, whatever, but the kind of overarching title is psychotherapy. And so 2 major continuums on which the approaches range are degree of directiveness and degree of intensiveness. So counseling that's very directive is where the counselor takes more of the main seat. So where sessions go, what we talk about is determined by the counselor, whereas approaches that are less directive are very client-centered. So the client directs the process and the goals. And then intensive is, more often, longer length of maybe sessions, or meet more often, meet for a longer amount of time versus, brief or short types of counseling. And so the textbook goes on to discuss specifically psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis is what we think of when we think of the origins of the field of psychology. And so Freud. It talks about different things that he would use, like the study of dreams and free association, transference and countertransference, insights, things like that, we often think of when we think of counseling. And some of these really are valid today and have been, continued to be used, like the idea of transference and countertransference, and even dream analysis and things like that. But of course, a lot of people have moved away from Freud's, ideas solely, and kind of have branched out a little bit to like the neo-Freudians and things like that. those who engage in this type of counseling must be aware of resistances that they can help the patient overcome. And so resistance is sort of seen as a natural part of the process that needs to be worked through. Um, it's also a process involving a gradual breakdown of the personality and rebuilding it into changed, rebuilding of it in changed patterns at the same time. So working on changing the client as they're moving forward, but also those internal structures too. So kind of a very different type of counseling would be the client-centered therapy that was started by Rogers. We can often hear this referred to as person-centered, and a lot of the counseling theories that are considered humanistic in nature have a lot of these same things. But also when we think about common factors that go across all counseling theories or all human service work, a lot of those ideas are included in Rogers' client-centered therapy, such as empathy, unconditional positive regard, genuineness, authenticity, things like that. And so for Rogers, the most important thing was the relationship. And so building that authentic therapeutic relationship between client and counselor is most important in making change happen. And so again, it's very non-directive. It focuses on where the client wants to go. A lot of it relies on self-report. Some of the key characteristics: the therapist makes strong, consistent efforts to understand the client's content of speech and feelings as conveyed by their words, gestures, and expressions. The therapist makes effort to communicate this understanding with an attitude of acceptance. There's an occasional presentation of condensation or synthesis of expressed feelings. So, paraphrasing and reframing and things like that. There are occasional statements on the nature and limits of the therapeutic relationship, and the therapist's confidence in the client's ability to handle their problems. Questions answering and data are giving or denied when they seem to increase the client's dependency. So the idea is like, I'm not giving you the answers. You need to come up with them yourself because I don't want you to build reliance on me as a counselor. You need to start being able to rely on yourself for those answers. Interpretations are avoided unless they're somehow summative in nature, like summarizing what the client has said and kind of putting it all together. The therapist does not try to promote insight directly, give advice, praise, blame, or teach, or otherwise direct the client. It's really, again, very client-led. It's the process of disorganization and reorganization of the self. So not tearing it down and building up something new, but it's just kind of taking that disorganization and reorganizing it in a way that's more helpful for the client. And so it goes into a couple of the key tenets of this type of counseling work and some things that are considered necessary within the counseling world. So a contract must be present. The client and the counselor must agree on goals and all of that. The client senses a difference between their experiences and their self-concept. The therapist experiences support, his or her own self-concept. The therapist experiences unconditional positive regard, empathic understanding, and the client experiences the therapist as being empathic and having positive regard. So us both doing that and the client picking that up. Prescriptive psychotherapy is a treatment approach based on the assumption that therapy is most effective if it's tailored to the specific problem of the client. And so it wouldn't be, I'm going to specifically work from this perspective, these interventions, but I'm going to learn about the client, what's going on with them, and I'm going to select things that specifically work for them. And so this could be multimodal therapy, which was started by Lazarus. It identifies 7 domains of experience in which problems might occur and that we should work on. And so it uses the acronym BASIC ID. So it looks at the behavior, the affect, the sensation, the imagery, the cognition, the interpersonal relationships, and drugs and physiological states that the client might be experiencing, and then works within those realms depending on where the needs are. So some structural variations, like I talked about in the beginning, we have those different modalities of counseling. It talks about group therapy and the impact of that, the way that peer support and peer pressure can work, and the way that the therapist can kind of moderate that group dynamic to help others. Some of the things that can be helpful is that they discover their problems are not unique, so they don't feel quite so alone. They become involved with others while being supported and potentially support others, which can be helpful for them. It helps reduce some tension and anxiety because they're getting stuff out. They can study their own behavior in relation to others. So how am I impacting others and what's their impact on me, to gain some insight and understanding. They can receive strong support in changing their self-defeating behaviors. They see themselves and as others really see them, not as they imagine others see them. So they get that real-time feedback from other people. They have a chance to receive intrinsic rewards of helping people, again. Practice and develop positive self-supporting behaviors. And then again, as we talked about in the beginning, family therapy and what that might look like. And family therapy takes on a number of different forms. It could be couples work, marriage work, entire family. It could be child to parent, siblings. It can include the whole family, parts of the family. So there's lots of different things that can be done there. And there's lots of different family therapy specific theories that can be used. So it's a whole topic in and of itself. And then finally, evaluating the effectiveness of psychotherapy approaches. And so it talks about ways that it can be helpful. It also, again, goes back to those 4 common factors in therapies: is the extra therapeutic effort, someone outside of your life, the quality of relationship between the client and therapist being important, the expectancy or hope of the client, and then finally, the techniques that are used are sort of the least important, kind of in that order. So the chapter gives a nice little summary, some end notes, recommended readings, internet sites for you to check out on group psychotherapy and psychotherapy in general. And with group psychotherapy, it doesn't mention this this organization, which would be really good to check out, is the Association for Specialists in Group Work, ASGW. I don't know offhand what their website is, but it's for anybody in any field. So it's not just counselors and psychotherapists, it's for anybody who engages in the group work process. And so that might be helpful to look at regardless of what human services field you end up going into, ASGW. So they're a great, amazing organization. And then finally, connecting with My Helping Lab. So if you do have the My Helping Lab along with your textbook, there are some activities that will help you engage in this material a little bit more as you work on this chapter. And so any questions, feel free to let me know, and look forward to the next video when we go over chapter 9. Thanks.